Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, Chicago's residential real estate market is booming as prices rise and inventory falls. What's driving the buying frenzy?
We cannot both embrace the big lie and embrace the Constitution.
Our Spotlight Politics team on the GOP removing Liz Cheney from leadership and the fissures in the Republican Party.
It's the technology that police officers say helps them track gunfire, but critics say the Shotspotter technology is missing the mark.
NASA's Ingenuity Helicopter takes flight on Mars. We get an update on the space agency's most ambitious mission to the Red Planet.
And speaking of celestial news, we have tips on how to watch all of the solar system's inner planets starting tonight.
And now home.
A local company that's kept the Saison in Chicago for over 60 years.
And we introduce you to members of the Hyde Park Jazz Fest ahead of their virtual performance with Chicago Takes 10. But first, some of today's top stories. Escalating tensions in Israel and Palestine are reverberating back here in Chicago. A coalition of Palestinian organizations is demonstrating at this hour at the intersection of Michigan and Ida B. Wells Drive downtown. The groups say they're condemning the displacement of Palestinians at the hands of Israelis in East Jerusalem. The dispute has led to rocket fire and violent clashes in Gaza and Israel. Palestinian health authorities report 48 dead in the violence, while Israeli officials have reported 7 fatalities on their side. And we'll have more on this tomorrow. A health scare for Chicago's top federal prosecutor. A spokesperson confirms that U.S. Attorney John Lausch was hospitalized Saturday after suffering stroke-like symptoms. Spokesperson says Lausch is back in the office and not currently under any medical restrictions. Now, Lausch is expected to remain in his position until a successor is nominated by the Biden administration and confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Illinois public health officials report just under 1,800 new cases of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, including 26 additional deaths. That makes for a total case count of 1.359 million cases and 22,285 deaths. The 7-day test positivity rate is down to 3.3%. And state officials hope relaxed COVID restrictions lead to a boost in tourism for the state. Today, Governor J.B. Pritzker unveiled a $6 million marketing campaign called Enjoy Illinois. The campaign targets specifically people from border states, encouraging them to take a road trip in our state.
Whether you want to ease your way back into travel or are raring to go, taking the Great American Road Trip is a great way to enjoy yourself and to stay safe.
And that ad campaign you saw repurposes the song Time for Me to Fly into Time for Me to Drive. That song, obviously, from the Illinois band REO Speedwagon. And the state is slated to move into the bridge phase of reopening this Friday, and that'll allow increased capacity in restaurants, shops, museums, and event venues. And now back to Brandis for a look at what's heating up the hot housing market. Brandis.
Paris, that's right. The Chicago housing market is on fire. The number of local home sales skyrocketed in late 2020 and early this year, driving prices in the Chicago metro area to all-time highs. Sales were up almost 25% in March of this year compared to March 2020, according to data from the trade group Illinois Realtors. Now, that's translated into lightning fast turnover as people put their homes up for sale, as well as a decline in inventory of available houses and units. Joining us with more on what's driving this seller's market are Luis Lopez, an assistant professor at the Stewart Handler Department of Real Estate at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and Dennis Rodkin, who covers the residential real estate market for Crane Chicago Business. Welcome to Chicago Tonight. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight, both of you. Dennis, let's start with you, please. Give us a brief overview of what the residential market looks like in Chicago right now.
It looks like a wildfire. It looks like it's really hard to believe how quickly houses are selling, how fast prices are going up. Brandis, I've been covering this for a long time, and since 2007, since the last big boom, or the end of the last big boom, we have seen nothing like this. There are homes, large numbers of homes sell without ever going on the market or officially going on the market. They go on private listing networks. They sell via informal networks, families, neighbors, that sort of thing, before ever hitting the market. And we've had double-digit price increases week after week throughout the past 4 or 5 months over the corresponding week from a year earlier.
And Louise, how has the pandemic changed home buying habits?
Well, one of the first things is that individuals are able to work from far away, not necessarily in their workplace. As a result, there's a desire to move away from the city and go to the suburbs or locations where there's more room, more elbow room, right? Space between houses and so forth.
Dennis, how much of a role would you say low interest rates are playing in this?
It's making it all possible. If I'm interested in moving for reasons that Louise said, or I'm just interested in moving because we've gotten married, we've had more children, whatever it is, I need classroom space for kids who are schooling at home. What's making it possible is interest rates have been so low, it's sort of hard to believe. Your parents would not, their jaws would drop if they knew that you're taking out a loan at below 3% interest. In the 70s and 80s, they were borrowing at over 15% interest. The fact that interest rates have been below 3% for so long, or stayed below 3% for a very long time in late 2020 and early 2021, means that houses have been more affordable than they had been in decades.
Louise, how does this compare with what's going on around the rest of the country?
Well, pretty much when you look at it nationwide, the general trend is that consumers have been able to save quite a lot of money over the last 12 months and build wealth from massive returns in equity investments like stocks. And then also the government assistance like the stimulus checks have substantially helped out. So across the nation, what we're seeing is that households or people who want to become homeowners have more have more money in their pocket and are bringing it to the negotiating table when putting a bid on a property.
Dennis, you mentioned, price increases, the percentage, it's, into the double digits. Do we see any signs that this frenzy might slow down?
Yes, it might. And part of the reason is that prices have gone up so much that it's going to shake sellers into the market. I was unwilling to sell because for a lot of reasons, I thought it was too expensive for me to move. My home was underwater. I owed more on the mortgage than the house is worth. Or I was just scared because I keep seeing these houses down my block sell in 4 or 5 days, and I don't think I can find a home fast enough. But the prices are getting so high, and people are finding ways to make up for some of those problems I mentioned, that we're starting to see the inventory of homes come on the market, a larger number of homes come on the market. And as inventory rises, of course, as there's more supply, then the demand doesn't drive prices up quite so much. But that doesn't mean we're going to go from the 17% price increases we've had down to 3%. It just seems as if it will mellow a little bit.
Now, Luis, I hear a lot of this, and a lot of folks start to think about the housing boom in the mid-2000s that led us to the Great Recession. Are you concerned at all that something similar could happen now?
A lot needs to happen so that we observe something like in the previous recession. Just to start off, the financing aspect or the financing fundamentals are very, very different. In the previous recession, or leading up to the previous recession, a lot of loans that should not have been made were made. And during this period today, the underwriting standards are substantially higher. People need higher credit scores. They need to show that they have the right debt to income ratio in order to qualify for a loan. So the borrowers out there, or the people who are obtaining loans, they're more likely to pay them back. So, and then couple that with the increase in equity, it's going to be very difficult to see people actually defaulting on their mortgages or choosing not to pay their mortgages. So I would be surprised if we see something like the previous recession.
So not as likely to have that housing bubble that we had last time, which is probably a relief to a lot of people who are thinking that. Dennis, though, how much of a problem is low inventory in the housing market right now?
It's an extreme problem. I have talked to people who get 30 or 40 walkthroughs of a house the first couple of days it goes on the market. And that's not just because it's a really cool looking house. That's because there are very few others to look at. Inventory, we started 2021 with the smallest number of homes on the market going back to about 2007. And we had a very high wave of demand, and it just keeps, it hasn't solved itself yet. We haven't brought enough homes on the market. I thought people would start getting flushed into the market when spring came, and some have, but it really hasn't increased to the point that what we need is for there to be more houses coming on the market than there are going off in any given week. And we are not at that point yet. Ordinarily, that wouldn't be such a great thing. It's just that inventory has been so tight that we need to build up a little extra by having more come on than go off the market, than get sold.
You know, some buyers have gotten creative to get the attention of a potential seller. You know, Dennis, what's your advice to buyers who are on the market for a house right now?
Well, there are a couple of things. You should not plan to put in any contingencies. You should not say, we want your house, but we need to put contingent in the contract, the idea that first we have to sell ours. You should have all your financing lined up, because sellers, you know, they're generally hit with a bidding war, and they're going to take the one that is most likely to go through, the one that's most convenient for them. If they have to put it under contract and then wait for you to get your house sold, that's not very convenient for them, and they have a lot of other options right now. So you should really put in a really good offer that is solid, that has everything nailed down, contingencies and otherwise. You also, several people have told me that generally you should be shopping for homes that are, if you're pre-qualified, let's just say for a $300,000 house, you should be shopping below that level at homes that are priced at about $280,000, because it's very likely that you're going to get into a bidding war and need to pay more than the sticker price. And you should be able to do that. You should be sure that you're shopping for things where you are actually able to do that. So shop below the amount that you're pre-approved for.
Good to know if you're in the market. My thanks to Dennis Rodkin and Luis Lopez for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now to Paris with more details on a mission on Mars. Paris.
Brandis, the U.S. finds itself in the midst of an intriguing space race. That is, the race to find any evidence of life on Mars. NASA's Perseverance rover has been on the surface of the red planet since February, and in recent weeks, the space agency's most ambitious mission to date on the planet has already scored a number of firsts. Joining us to give us an update on just how this mission is going is astronomer and space enthusiast Mark Hammergren. Mark, it's always great to see you. So before we talk about what's going on now, remind us the purpose of this mission.
So NASA for quite a while now has been focused on a really big question, and that is, does life exist on Mars? Does life have a history of living on Mars and throughout the past? And this mission is the first one to really be able to directly address that.
And I think David Bowie also asked that question in a song. So what kinds of ancient life could this Mars rover detect? What are we looking for?
Most likely microbial life. It'd be great if we could find big fossils, but that's not very likely. So it's designed to look for trace chemicals, or perhaps even little microscopic structures that indicate that things were living there on Mars in these places.
And what gives scientists reason to believe that they could find that?
Well, because the conditions on Mars, as hostile as they seem to us humans, they can support microbial life very, very well. And we find bacteria and other microbes here on Earth that exist under really extreme circumstances. It's a growing field of study, and Mars could very well support that kind of life.
All right, let's talk about all the firsts that this enterprise has accomplished so far. First time a helicopter has been flown as a drone from another planet. How is that working?
It's working extraordinarily well. Now, this helicopter, the Ingenuity Helicopter, is really a test bed. Keep in mind that it's a prototype. I mean, the first one ever. Wright brothers didn't fly passengers on their first plane flight. So Ingenuity is not designed to produce great science, but rather show what could be done by a small helicopter on Mars in the future.
So these are baby steps here. And tell us how... First of all, there's another first here. I think we have our first sounds from Mars. I think we have the sound of a very windy, bleak landscape. There it is. What does that sound like to you, Mark?
It sounds like wind blowing against a microphone. And anyone who has used a phone outside would recognize that kind of sound. And it's fantastic because that's Mars that we're hearing.
So it doesn't sound too different from our own planet. Another thing going on here is this instrument called MOXIE, which is used to convert Mars' carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere into oxygen. How does that work?
Well, it uses both electricity and heat to take that carbon dioxide, a very thin carbon dioxide atmosphere, and break the carbon dioxide apart, and part of that is oxygen. So it can concentrate that, and the astronauts can use it for breathing in the future, perhaps, or use it for rocket fuel.
And rocket fuel is important because if we land a crew on there, we have to find a way to have them take off and come back. So what does this portend for when we might be able to send people to Mars?
Well, it means that we have demonstrated we can generate some of these resources there on the surface of Mars. Anything we make there means that we don't have to haul it there from to Mars from Earth. And the amount of oxygen you need to launch people back off of Mars to Earth is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 tons of that stuff. So it would be a great help to have it there.
And how about for folks to actually be able to breathe the atmosphere and stay there for a while?
Well, I think that would be very essential, yes.
Well, how far away from that are we, do you think?
You know, that's a good question, and there are no definitive timetables for that. Heck, we don't even have a definitive timetable for getting back to the moon. But most numbers seem to indicate the 2030s.
Well, hopefully we'll all be around to see that. It's very exciting. So tell us about where this mission landed. It's the Jezero crater. It's a very specific place on Mars.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The crater appears to be a former lake bed. Looks like there was a lake, there was a river running into it, and there's a big delta deposit of debris and sediments that got deposited right into the lake. And the Perseverance probe landed not too far away, bang on where it was supposed to, next to this delta. So that's going to be a great place to investigate the history of water on Mars. And on Earth, this is a great place to look for life on a planet.
And of course, where there's water, there is the potential for life. And clearly, yes, it seems to be 100% certain that there was water there at the Jezero crater. And then there's concerns about perhaps getting some of the Earth microbiomes on Mars, which is not something scientists want. Talk about those concerns.
Well, yeah, that's a great concern because it would be incredibly tragic if we found life on Mars and it proved to be Earth life that we contaminated it with. So microbes, as we discussed earlier, can survive in the conditions on the surface of Mars and right under the surface of Mars. If we brought bacteria that can survive the transit through space and the conditions on Mars, then they might reproduce on the surface of Mars. So we have to try to minimize those chances. Now, as anyone who's grown a garden here on Earth, just because you get the right conditions and you get the seeds doesn't mean that things will propagate. So I'm not incredibly worried right now.
But it looks like there might be the potential for that, however minimal, and I think Ray Bradbury wrote about that. What about taking samples back to Earth from Mars? Is that going to happen?
It's not going to happen with this mission. Perseverance is collecting rock samples and sticking them into tubes, collecting tubes, that will be dropped off on the surface and left there for a future mission to pick up and hopefully bring back to Earth.
What are the next steps here? We mentioned this has been on the ground in Mars since February. What are we going to learn in the coming months?
Well, Perseverance is right now coming to a close of its startup and checkout procedures. It was able to do that while it launched the helicopter. And now it's going to begin its journey towards the Delta, taking a meandering path. And it's going to be doing science investigations now, looking at rocks, drilling into them, collecting rock samples.
All right, well, we'll see what those samples turn up. And our thanks, as always, to Mark Hammergren. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And in other space news, starting tonight, you can catch the solar system's inner planets in the night sky. We'll tell you how to do that later in the program. And we are back with more right after this.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including our Spotlight Politics team and their take on the split within the Republican Party. But first, the sound of Chicago. That's how a new and free virtual performance series is being described. Arts correspondent Angel Edo introduces us to a virtual tour of the city's art scene from Chicago Takes 10.
Meet Greg Ward and Jemani Taylor. The saxophonist and tap dancer are artists with the Hyde Park Jazz Fest.
It's a conversation.
Yeah.
We're having a dialogue up here, using some familiar jazz forms, using some original compositional forms to improvise, and kind of really express ourselves.
They're also performers in the Chicago Takes 10 showcase.
We are delivering some of the raw elements of jazz music, even playing in this acoustic way.
This bi-weekly online performance series features a multitude of Chicago artists with no two shows the same.
What we're seeing in this series of 10 shows is the tremendous cultural diversity that Chicago has throughout of our neighborhoods. We're really hearing, the sound of Chicago.
Live streamed from Constellation Performing Arts, each 60 to 90-minute show features performances from one of the 10 art groups funded by the Walder Foundation. It's through this monetary support that they're able to assist both the organization and the artists.
The technology is allowing us to reach more people, potentially, and I think it's not something that's going to go away. It'll just keep getting better and better.
And while this isn't the first virtual performance series to highlight what the city's art world has to offer, Chicago Takes 10 MC Sandra Delgado says she couldn't think of a better way to motivate artists when they need it most.
To see these artists who really have been creating this whole time, whether or not their audience is there, and now that their audience is there, that they get to share this. So I guess a big takeaway is just don't stop, keep dreaming.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Edo.
You can catch Greg Ward and Jemani Taylor tomorrow night at 6 alongside a number of other artists with the Hyde Park Jazz Fest. Visit our website on how to join that live stream, and we've also got details on past and future shows featuring artists from groups like the National Museum of Mexican Art and See Chicago Dance. And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
Looks like a great program. Thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, a new study questions the accuracy and utility of Chicago Police Department's gunfire detection system called Shotspotter.
We cannot both embrace the big lie and embrace the Constitution.
The GOP removes Liz Cheney from leadership. Our Spotlight Politics team weighs in on that and divisions in the Republican Party. You can spot the inner planets of the solar system in the night sky this week. We will tell you how. And after 6 decades of keeping Chicago spicy, La Criolla Foods is poised for growth with the city's Latino community. But first, some more of today's top stories. A panel with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended the use of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine in children between 12 and 15 years old. That panel agreed that benefits of being vaccinated outweigh any risks from taking the vaccine. And all Chicago vaccination sites will be open to kids in that age group starting tomorrow. In Illinois, public health officials report just under 1,800 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours, including 26 additional deaths. That makes for a total case count of 1.359 million cases and 22,285 deaths. And more than 36% of the state's population is now fully vaccinated. A group of activists is urging Mayor Lori Lightfoot to make sure that Mercy Hospital continues on as a full-service health care provider. The Bronzeville Hospital is set to be sold to a new owner, Insight Health, at the end of the month, but a group called the Health Equity Coalition says the new owners are trying to get out of a TIF agreement with the city, and that agreement allows for public funding on the condition that Mercy remains a full-service hospital. Activists say they want Lightfoot to ensure that agreement stays in place.
What we demand in writing from you is a commitment for Mercy Hospital to remain a full-service hospital, not a specialty center, for at least a decade.
And a pioneer in the Chicago jazz and blues world died today. Bob Kester was the founder of Chicago-based Delmark Records, also the owner of Jazz Record Mart for more than half a century. Here's a short clip of Kester speaking with Phil Ponce in our studio in 2008.
You've been in business. The first 5 in St. Louis, 50 in Chicago. When you started out, did you have any idea you would have this long a run?
Well, the record business is easy to get into and hard to get out of, and I just love it. I love the music. So I don't know what else to do. Susan says I should retire. I don't know what I'd retire to.
I remember that segment well, and Jazz Record Mart is truly a special place. Kester was 88. Continuing on our space theme, if you're looking for something to watch tonight, after Chicago Tonight is over, of course, then head outside for a fascinating celestial show. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now with more. All right, hey, Patty, tell us what we're going to be viewing tonight as soon as the show is over at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's really cool. 3 planets, the 3 inner planets besides Earth, Venus, Mars, and Mercury, are all in the night sky this week. So tonight you can catch Venus at twilight. Tomorrow you can see Mercury, and on Saturday you should be able to have a good view of Mars.
How cool. So tell us the best places to get the best views.
Right. Well, they're all, you want to look to the west, and the perfect thing is that what makes this so cool is that the crescent moon will serve as your guide. So a lot of times it's really hard to find planets in the sky. The crescent moon, look to that, low in the horizon. That's where you'll find Venus, just at twilight. And then Mercury and Mars will be a little higher in the sky. But again, use that crescent moon as your guide, and you should be able to spot them because they'll be quite bright.
And is this going to be for a couple of days or just tonight?
Just for the next few days, that they'll all be so nicely aligned with the moon that you'll be able to see them in the night sky.
All right, I'm looking to go do that in just about a half an hour. Patty Wetley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website. It's WTTW.com/news. Up next, a look at the criticism of the Chicago Police Department's Shotspotter technology in a conversation that first aired on Sunday's Chicago Tonight Black Voices. So please stay with us.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/daily briefing and sign up.
The Chicago Police Department's use of acoustic gunfire detection system called Shotspotter has come into sharp focus in recent weeks. In particular, after 13-year-old Adam Toledo was shot to death by an officer responding to the technology's alerts in March. A new study by Northwestern University's MacArthur Justice Center found that 86% of police deployments responding to Shotspotter alerts resulted in no reports of any crime, leading to questions of its value in violence reduction. And a coalition of nonprofits represented by the MacArthur Justice Center recently filed an amicus brief in a pending murder case that relies on Shotspotter evidence. Joining us to talk about Shotspotter's use in Chicago are Ardenise Myrick, a congressional organizer with Live Free Chicago, a faith-based organization working against mass incarceration and violence; Jonathan Maines, an attorney with the MacArthur Justice Center who spearheaded the study; and Freddie Martinez, director of Lucy Parsons Labs. That's a transparency, police accountability, and digital security nonprofit. Lucy Parsons Labs was among the organizations who filed that amicus brief. We also invited the Chicago Police Department to join this conversation, but received no response. And we invited Shotspotter to send a representative, but they declined, instead sending a statement that we will get to in just a minute. But first, I want to get to you, Jonathan Maines. Shotspotter claims a 97% accuracy rate. How do you define accuracy? How do they define it?
I honestly don't know. I don't understand how they get to a 90% accuracy rate when what we found using City of Chicago data is that 86% of the time when the police respond to a Shotspotter alert, they don't find anything, no evidence of any crime or any other reportable incident. And so I don't understand where they get those numbers from. What we do know is that Shotspotter has never done a properly validated study to see how often the system is triggered by things like firecrackers or construction noises or helicopters. So it seems to me that it's very possible that a lot of these alerts, most of these, unfounded alerts, are the system responding to other loud noises that you have in a city like Chicago and are sending the police out thinking that there's gunfire when there's probably nothing.
And as you were speaking, we're looking at some video of some of CPD's strategic decision command centers. That is where the Shotspotter technology is usually hubbed, along with some other technologies. Freddie Martinez, your objections to Shotspotter are not just about the system's accuracy, but more about the organization's belief that it contributes to an over-policing in black and brown neighborhoods. Can you tell us more about why that's what you think?
Absolutely. Shotspotter is not found in any majority white neighborhoods. Obviously, we know that that's not the case, that there's no gun violence in these neighborhoods. So what happens realistically is that you have police officers, really thinking that there's gunfire, racing to the scene of where black and brown people are, hanging out, going about their lives, and really just thinking that everyone is an armed suspect. It's quite dangerous. And it leads to very harmful interactions, which is one of the things that we saw with the Adam Toledo case. If it wasn't for Shotspotter, if it wasn't for the high risk foot chase, then maybe that child would still be alive today.
Artenice Myrick, how do you think, or how do people who live in these communities where the Shotspotter exists, how do they feel about that technology being there?
We feel that it's ineffective. We're still dying when police officers come on the scene. Shotspotter does nothing but monitor and surveillance black communities. It doesn't bring them or make them safe.
So in a statement, Shotspotter said, quote, Shotspotter's highly effective technology with a 97% accuracy rating nationwide is a vital tool for law enforcement to render rapid assistance to gun violence victims, reduce violent crime, helping to bring peace to communities suffering from persistent gun violence. Now, Jonathan, your research found that 40,000 reports from Shotspotter did not result in crime reports, and that there were only, I think it was about 5,000 incidents that actually did lead to a police record. What would a good efficacy rate look like for a system like this?
Have to be much higher. 60 times a day, the system is sending the police out into black and brown neighborhoods, thinking that somebody's armed and has just fired a gun, and then they find nothing. I mean, imagine being, on the corner or on the street when the police descend, thinking that you have a gun and are, shooting. It creates a really dangerous situation. There really isn't evidence that it makes communities safer, which kind of stands to reason if it's sending police out on sort of wild goose chases so often. And this is all just responsive. It's all reacting to after the shots are fired. It's not reducing the causes of gun violence in our communities.
And your report referred to, and something you mentioned earlier, was generating no evidence of gunfire or gun-related crime. What does that mean? What do the officers find when they get to the area where the Shotspotter deployed them?
Well, it seems like 86% of the time they find nothing. We actually were pretty conservative. We count things like unlawful possession of a weapon. If they find someone on the scene who has an illegal gun, that doesn't mean that they fired it. It's possible that there were no shots fired. But to be sort of conservative with our study, we counted those as part of the 10% or so that are gun-related incidents. So 9 times out of 10, the police aren't recording any gun incident.
Artenice, what do you think that $33 million, that's the contract that the city has with Shotspotter over 3 years, what could that $33 million be spent on? Is it worth the Shotspotter technology?
Absolutely. $33 million is a lot to be invested into the Black community, since that's where they're mostly deployed to. That $33 million could be allocated towards preventative services, holistic mental health services, hospital-based services. Centering policing has not been seen as effective to deter crime or to keep people safe. And so that $33 million could go towards preventative services that could potentially save lives.
Freddie, your organization was among the 3 that are filing the amicus brief on a separate case. Why do you all believe that the Shotspotter evidence should be excluded in that case?
Sure. We have scientific standards for evidence that should be included in a court case. You know, DNA evidence is reliable, but that's because people have spent decades testing it. And including one of the arguments we make is that including this evidence doesn't meet a scientific standard and really can't be included in a court case. You know, we wouldn't want DNA evidence being included if it's wrong 9 times out of 10, and why would we allow this technology to also be included? So that's one of the main arguments that we're raising, because if we allow this technology to be used in this way, we're really allowing people's civil rights and their criminal rights in court to be taken away from them in a way that, you know, we've never intended.
Artenise, does your organization think that, you know, that this Shotspotter technology contributes to the over-policing of Black and brown communities, or does it help with maintaining or having a police presence in those communities?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned before, it just over surveillances Black communities. It over monitors them. We're sending police in with high risk, they're with heightened senses, racing into these different situations that, again, like Freddie and Jonathan both stated, a gun may not have been fired, but yet we're sending officers into these communities with desensitized types of attitudes, because again, 86% of this has been shown to not be effective or to find guns. And so the Black and brown communities are just, again, centering police strategies, and we do not need police strategies. We need new tactics that can help mitigate trauma, help mitigate death and homicides in our communities, not policing.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Jonathan Maines, Freddie Martinez, and Artenise Myrick for joining us. Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this. Chicago's top federal prosecutor, John Lausch, hospitalized by a mini stroke, and the schism in the Republican Party over Liz Cheney's ouster in our Spotlight Politics. Joining us with all that and more are Heather Sharon and Paris Schutz. Welcome back, team. So, as I just mentioned, we know that U.S. Attorney John Lausch was hospitalized over the weekend with a mini stroke. Heather, what do we know?
Well, we know that he went to the hospital Saturday and he spent the night there before being discharged on Sunday. Now, his spokesman told me today that he was back at work on Monday and is under no medical restrictions and things are business as usual. But I think a lot of people were alarmed because he is playing such a prominent role in Chicago politics right now.
Right, so a lot of public corruption investigations going on in his office that we know of anyway. Which ones is he working on, Heather? Refresh our memory.
Well, he is prosecuting Alderman Ed Burke, who is facing a 14-count indictment of public corruption. He's also in charge of all sorts of different corruption investigations relating to House Speaker Michael Madigan, including 4 of his aides who were once lobbyists for ComEd. He's also indicted former Alderman Rick Munoz for stealing money from the Progressive Caucus, as well as Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson, who is accused of filing false tax returns. And he's also in charge of prosecuting several Illinois residents who were part of the January 6th assault on the United States Capitol. So he definitely has his hands full.
In Paris, we know, obviously, being U.S. Attorney in these parts, that is a pressure cooker job. And as Heather reported, he's been back at work. But, you know, could a health scare affect the timing of any of these cases?
Absolutely not, Brandis, because most of these investigations started before his arrival on the scene as U.S. Attorney. They're going to continue on after he's gone, after there is a nominee to replace him, and after that nominee is confirmed. There's a group of prosecutors that have worked on all of these cases. It's the same prosecutors on many of them, Burke, ComEd, and they've been in that office for many, many years. I would imagine they're going to continue to be in that office, and that work goes on, whoever's at the top.
So, obviously, the hack of the Colonial Pipeline, that has made international news, but Chicago City Council is dealing with the fallout of a hack, too. When a ransom wasn't paid, the mayor and her staff's emails were dumped on the internet, in the dark web. Here is what the mayor said about commenting on the contents of those emails.
We have no way of knowing whether or not those emails are in fact legitimate, that they have been put online in their original form, and also, somebody who's committed a federal crime of stealing emails, I don't want to credit them as a credible news source.
Now, Heather, let's start with what we know about what happened. How did these emails get to be sort of hacked and then dumped on the internet? And what is this we're hearing about a ransom?
Well, what we know is that these emails were turned over from the city to law firm Jones Day, which has been tapped by the mayor to investigate everything surrounding the botched raid of Anjanette Young. She was the social worker who was left naked and handcuffed, pleading for help from the Chicago Police Department because they had raided her apartment mistakenly. These were the emails the city turned over to Jones Day that somehow ended up on the dark web. Now, the mayor said on Monday that the city had been asked to pay a ransom to prevent these emails from being released. The city refused. Jones Day apparently also refused, according to the mayor. And so now all of these emails are on the internet for everybody to search through, and every Chicago political person has been searching their name for the last several days.
But I got to jump in and add here. I mean, there's an ethical question here for journalists.
Absolutely.
And you know, these emails, yes, this is public business. The public has a right to know about everything that's being said in these emails, but that it was gotten from these kind of devious means, I think does raise an ethical quandary. And it kind of reminds one of Russian operatives hacking the DNC's emails back 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years, whenever that was at this point. I'm not sure what the right answer is here. I mean, I think it's worth it to look at these emails and then FOIA for the FOIA for the specifics, so that they were gotten by more normal means, but that's a lot of work to go through.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Paris. But in the meantime, some intrepid reporters have gone digging through them and discovered that there was a secret CPD, or Chicago Police Department, drone program. What do we know about that one?
Well, that's the Sun-Times reporters went through and found that one. That was on the front page of their paper today, and according to that email and according to that report, it's a drone program financed by money from seized assets. So, according to how the reporters in that story describe it, kind of off-books financing for this drone program. We don't know much more. What we do know is that anytime you talk about this kind of thing, it raises eyebrows among civil libertarians. The ACLU, calling this out, saying that there's a lot of problems here. If this is being used to monitor things like protests, it calls to mind years ago when the CPD used these Stingray machines to jam cell phone signals at protests. Also, using biometric data to try and solve crimes. And maybe there is an element to these things that does help solve crimes, but CPD has to weigh whether that's violating civil liberties and where the legality is here.
And Heather, the other thing these emails may have revealed so far is that the mayor actually lobbied for qualified immunity. What do we know there?
Well, qualified immunity gives police officers a great deal of protection when they're accused of either misconduct or criminal actions in the line of duty. Now, there has been many proposals at the state level to change the state law that would make it easier, advocates say, to hold police officers accountable. But the police union and police advocates say that would make it really hard for police officers to do their jobs. And those emails from Mayor Lightfoot reflect her public position, is that officers deserve to be protected from those sort of claims when it's not clear whether there has been misconduct or criminal activity. But this is at the heart of the debate going on right now in the United States Senate about how to reform policing in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and how to reform the Chicago Police Department under the watchful eye of a federal judge.
Paris, how does that look politically for the mayor? Didn't she campaign as sort of the criminal justice and police reformer?
Yeah, it doesn't look good, Brandis, and there's a lot of skepticism among reform advocates that she really is what she campaigned for. And remember, she was appointed by Rahm Emanuel to the Police Reform Task Force after the shooting of Laquan McDonald, and the video came out. And at the beginning, she didn't sound notes of reform. She sort of evolved into that sort of position, and now you see a bit of a muddled position.
So moving on to national politics, the GOP ousted conservative stalwart Liz Cheney from her leadership position for continuing to say that Joe Biden won the presidential election. Take a look.
We must speak the truth. Our election was not stolen, and America has not failed.
What happened today was sad. Liz has committed the only sin of being consistent and telling the truth. The truth is that the election was not stolen. 74 million voters were not disenfranchised. They were just outnumbered.
So, Paris, what does her ouster say about the future of the GOP?
Well, I think we should just look at the politics here. This is all politics, and the GOP leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy, has made the calculation, and a majority of his conference members agree that to win in 2022, to gain back the House, and for McCarthy to become Speaker of the House, they have to stick with Trump. Sticking with Trump means you have to indulge him in his fantasies of a stolen election. So the Republicans have made the political calculation that that's what's best for their careers. And if you look at the the Congresswoman from New York, Elise Stefanik, who was very critical of Trump, and now she's saying that she's indulging those lies about a stolen election as well. It's increasing her fundraising. It's getting her a position in leadership. And so there's a lot of anger from someone like Adam Kinzinger, a Republican, a conservative Republican. Liz Cheney's a conservative Republican. That, telling the truth here, a truth that's fundamental to democracy, just isn't welcome in the Republican Party anymore because the leadership has decided it's not good for their politics.
Heather, is Kinzinger the lone wolf here, standing with Liz Cheney?
Well, I don't know that he's the lone wolf, but he is certainly one of the very few wolves. He and Liz Cheney were two of only 10 Republicans in the United States House to vote to impeach Donald Trump, which means that they are very much in the minority within their own party, which of course is a minority in the House, which leaves them very vulnerable on two fronts. One, to redistricting in terms of the other seats outside of Wyoming, and Liz Cheney is very vulnerable to a Trump-backed candidate ousting her from her seat as the lone representative in the United States House for Wyoming. And I think that we will be watching their fate in the 2022 election very closely for a little bit more information about where the National Republican Party is going to go in the near future.
So talking a little bit about former Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Ambassador Rahm, potentially. Sources report that President Biden may appoint Emanuel as ambassador to Japan. Heather, what do we know about that, and what could that mean?
Well, it's not a done deal yet. We expect perhaps in the next several weeks that the president will make an announcement about a slate of ambassadors to high-profile positions like Japan. And if Rahm Emanuel is picked to go to Japan, it will be a bit of a political resurrection. He lobbied very hard for President Biden to pick him as transportation secretary. He was passed over for former South Bend mayor and now transportation secretary Pete Buttigieg. And this will be seen as Rahm Emanuel's return to politics, not just at a national level, but an international level. However, he has to be confirmed by the United States Senate, and that will no doubt draw fire from progressives who see him as basically somebody who should no longer be in public life after his role in the investigation of the police murder of Laquan McDonald here in Chicago.
And Paris, why Japan, and why Rahm Emanuel for Japan?
Well, I heard a progressive say, hey, they're okay with this because it gets Rahm Emanuel as far away from Chicago as geographically possible. Although, as Heather said, some of the progressive wing of that party is not happy with Rahm Emanuel in any position. He's gotten a lot of controversy among that wing of the party. But Japan's an important post. Let's not kid ourselves. China is the biggest geopolitical threat, according to President Biden, according to most observers on the international stage. Japan is a key ally in that region, so it would make sense to have somebody that you trust in that position to maintain a very close relationship with Japan.
And quickly, before I let you both go, Alderman Carrie Austin she had blown through a deadline to pay a reduced ethics fine. Heather, remind us what that fine was for and how she managed to get it reduced.
Well, she took $48,500 in improper campaign contributions from a business that had a bunch of city contracts. If you've got city contracts, you're very limited in the amount of money that you can give to candidates. Carrie Austin took money that she wasn't supposed to, and initially the Chicago Board of Ethics fined her 3 times that amount, so more than $140,000, but then they thought better of it and they reduced that fine to just $5,000. But Alderman Austin, who's the second longest serving alderman on the city council, didn't pay that by the deadline of midnight on Monday. And now the law department is charged with trying to collect that fine and to get those improper campaign contributions back.
Probably not a good look for an alderman on that front. We'll leave it there for now. Thanks to Spotlight Politics team Heather Sharoon in Paris Schuts. Up next, how a local company has been keeping the sazon in Chicago's kitchen since 1957. But first, a look at the weather.
When Avelino Maldonado started his spice distribution company La Criolla in Chicago in 1957, the biggest waves of Latino immigrants had yet to arrive. 64 years later, Latinos make up nearly 30% of the city's population, and La Criolla has new owners who hope to bring their flavors to another generation of cooks. Chicago Tonight's Erica Gunderson recently brought us this story. Here's another look.
I was born and raised in Chicago. So my mother used to use La Criolla brand. So I feel like it's a legacy in that part because we're bringing it on to our children and, our grandchildren.
As in so many cultures, for Latinos, the family kitchen is a sacred place where traditions are passed down from generation to generation. And since 1957, when Avelino Maldonado started La Criolla Foods by selling spice blends out of the trunk of his car, the company has offered a taste of home for Chicago's Latino families.
We have the sazon and the adobo. That was a creation from Avelino. That is like a multi-seasoning. You can put everything.
Maria and Jose Chaparro took over La Criolla Foods at its original location in the West Loop in 2016. They bought the company from founder Avelino Maldonado's wife, Carmen.
Carmen was looking for pass the legacy, Latino family, so we was the lucky ones to get it.
In 2018, the Chaparros moved La Criolla to a larger facility in South suburban Alsip. Since then, they've been working on plans to expand and promote their brand to a new generation via social media. La Criolla's finance and operations manager, Raul Rosas, says the pandemic has renewed interest in cooking at home.
It's been a resurgence of having to experiment again with your cooking and having to remember those recipes that your mom has made, or had to get on a Zoom call or Google Meet call with them or FaceTime to say, hey, am I doing this correctly? Am I picking the right spices? Am I adding the right pinch? Because it's always a pinch.
And getting just the right flavor to spark that memory of home cooking is La Criolla's mission.
What we hope is when they open it, they'll smell home and remember their mother, their grandmother cooking, whatever it may be. For me, it's the carne molida en chile verde that my mom makes.
Executive chef Roberto Perez is in charge of bringing those flavors to life via recipes and photos on social media.
What that means right now is that I'm doing some food testing, some testing with some spices, testing them out, checking them out in different particular recipes and seeing if any adjustments need to be made. So a lot of the ingredients are inspired from Caribbean cooking.
As part of extending their brand's reach, Rosas says another big move for La Criolla is in the works.
Which is what we're doing in our plans for this near future, is positioning it for an equity crowdfunding campaign where the community is able to invest and be part of the growth of La Criolla.
People know La Criolla is the local brand of Chicago.
And as the city's Latino population grows, Rosas says the company is positioned to grow along with it.
The Latino market is a market that's, I mean, I think it's been overlooked for quite some time. It's a sleeping giant, and it's a powerful, I mean, there's power in your household as a Latino household.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
For more on La Criolla, be sure to check out our website. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Some communities on Cook County's south side are lagging in the vaccine rollout. We visit the village of Riverdale for the next stop on our In Your Neighborhood series.
And vintage color photos of Chicago people and places from the late legendary photographer Vivian Maier. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Clifford Law Offices, whose attorneys have hundreds of years of combined experience in personal injury and wrongful death litigation.